My beloved child, before you dismiss this message as another ordinary soulmate story, pause for a moment, because the most important detail is not the day you are about to hear, it is the place. Monday carries a completely different feeling in this story, because your soulmate encounter is connected to somewhere you may have already passed without realizing its significance. You may have walked through this kind of place dozens of times. You may have gone there for something completely unrelated to love. And yet, imagine for a moment that the person you have been wondering about, the person whose presence seems strangely familiar even before you truly know them, is standing only a few steps away from you. You are not looking for them. They are not necessarily looking for you. That is what makes the moment so unexpected. The meeting begins naturally, almost casually, with nothing dramatic announcing itself. A glance. A small pause. A simple movement. Perhaps someone asks a question, holds a door, reaches for the same item, waits in the same line, or happens to stand beside you for a few extra seconds. But there is something about that moment that makes you look twice. And here is where the story becomes interesting, because the location is not some distant, impossible destination. It is connected to everyday life. It is the kind of place people visit because they have somewhere else to go. A cafe, a shopping area, a workplace entrance, a bookstore, a station, a familiar street, a place where people gather briefly before continuing their day. The reason this matters is because your soulmate story is not beginning with a fantasy. It is beginning with recognition hidden inside an ordinary moment. And Monday may arrive looking completely normal until one tiny detail makes you realize that this day was never going to feel ordinary. But there is another layer you need to notice, because the first sign may not be the person themselves. It may be the unusual reason you end up at the location. Something could shift in your routine. A plan changes. You decide to leave earlier. You take a different route. You stop somewhere you normally ignore. Someone asks you to accompany them. You remember something you had forgotten. You suddenly feel like going somewhere even though you had no strong reason to go there. That small change is where the suspense begins. Because if you follow your normal routine, you may never create the exact circumstances that allow the encounter to happen. And this is why the location matters more than the clock. You are not being told to chase someone or force an encounter. You are being drawn into a setting where two separate lives can naturally cross. The person may already have their own reason for being there. They could be carrying something, checking their phone, talking to someone, waiting for an appointment, choosing something, or simply standing quietly while everyone around them continues moving. You may notice one detail before anything else, their expression. Not necessarily a dramatic smile, but a look that feels strangely calm, familiar, almost as though the moment has interrupted a thought they were already having. Then comes the second clue. They look again. This time, neither of you immediately looks away. And suddenly the atmosphere changes. You may wonder why a complete stranger feels so familiar. They may wonder the exact same thing. That is the kind of moment that stays in your memory because nothing spectacular happened outwardly, yet internally, something shifted. And if you are listening closely, remember this: the strongest soulmate encounters do not always begin with a grand entrance. Sometimes they begin with two people realizing, almost simultaneously, that they have noticed each other. Now listen carefully, because the location may become clearer through the pattern surrounding it. Think about a place connected to movement and transition. Somewhere people arrive and leave. Somewhere you can enter for one reason and unexpectedly remain longer than planned. Somewhere there is a natural reason for strangers to cross paths. This could be near a cafe or restaurant, inside a mall or market, around a workplace or educational area, near a public transport point, inside a bookstore, at an event, or even in a quiet waiting area. The important part is not the exact name of the place. It is the feeling of being there temporarily. You are there because life placed you there, not because you went searching for your soulmate. That distinction changes everything. Imagine Monday beginning with you thinking about completely different things. You have responsibilities. You have plans. You may even feel distracted or emotionally unavailable for a few hours. Then something happens that makes you change direction. Maybe you stop for coffee. Maybe you enter a shop because you need one small thing. Maybe you arrive somewhere earlier than expected. Maybe you decide not to leave immediately. And somewhere within that small deviation, the person appears. What makes this revelation emotionally powerful is that you may not recognize the importance of the meeting immediately. You could walk away thinking, "That was interesting," and continue your day. But then you remember the person's eyes. You remember the exact sentence they said. You remember the unusual timing. You remember how strangely comfortable the interaction felt. And later, perhaps that evening, you realize something else. The encounter did not feel forced. It felt effortless. That is the clue. Your soulmate story does not need to begin with fireworks. It can begin with a conversation so simple that you almost underestimate it. Then, little by little, the simplicity becomes unforgettable. And here comes the part you should not overlook, because the location may be hiding in plain sight. Before Monday arrives, pay attention to the places that repeatedly appear in your thoughts, your plans, your routine, or even your conversations. Not because every coincidence has a mystical meaning, but because your own choices can reveal where you are most likely to naturally meet someone new. If you suddenly remember a place you have not visited recently, notice it. If an ordinary invitation takes you somewhere different, notice it. If you find yourself lingering somewhere instead of immediately leaving, notice it. The story is not about chasing a prediction. It is about being present when life creates an unexpected opportunity. And there is one final twist to this first chapter: the person may not immediately look like the person you imagined. They may not arrive in the exact appearance you expected. They may be quieter, more reserved, more ordinary. Their first words may be completely unromantic. In fact, the beginning may feel almost too simple. But something about the interaction will stay with you. A second glance. A small smile. A strange sense of familiarity. A conversation that seems to continue naturally even though you just met. And when you finally walk away, you may find yourself looking back, not because you know what is going to happen, but because some part of you is curious about what could happen next. Monday's real revelation is not that you must find a specific person at a specific address. It is that an ordinary place can suddenly become unforgettable when the right two people happen to occupy the same moment. And if that moment comes, do not rush it. Let the conversation breathe. Let the connection reveal itself naturally. Because sometimes the beginning of a powerful love story looks nothing like a beginning at all. My beloved child, there is a detail about this Monday encounter that makes the entire story even more intriguing, because the location may not be somewhere you originally planned to visit at all. The strongest clue is movement. A place you enter, pass through, wait in, or stop at briefly before continuing somewhere else. And that means your soulmate may appear during a moment you considered completely insignificant. You could be thinking about your schedule, checking your phone, looking for something, waiting for someone, or simply trying to finish an ordinary task when suddenly you notice a person nearby who captures your attention without demanding it. What happens next may be subtle, but it will feel different. Perhaps they look toward you at almost the exact moment you look toward them. Perhaps there is a brief smile that neither of you expected. Perhaps circumstances create a reason for you to speak. And then comes the strange part, the conversation may feel easier than it should. You will not need to manufacture topics or pretend to be more confident than you are. Something simple could open the door, a question about the place, a small observation, a shared reaction to something happening nearby. But underneath that ordinary exchange is a feeling that keeps pulling your attention back. You may walk away for a moment and then find yourself wondering where they went. That is why the location matters. It creates an environment where the first connection can happen naturally, without pressure, without chasing, and without either person realizing at first how significant the moment could become. There is another clue hidden inside the timing, and this one may surprise you. The encounter could happen when you are almost ready to leave. You may think the opportunity has already passed because nothing interesting happened during the first part of your visit. Then something delays you. A queue moves slowly. Someone calls you. You realize you forgot something. You stop to check one final thing. You decide to stay a few more minutes. That tiny delay can create the exact opening for the person to enter your surroundings. Suddenly, the ordinary location becomes the stage for a conversation neither person planned. And if you want to understand why this feels so powerful, imagine the alternative. If you had left 30 seconds earlier, you might never have seen them. If they had arrived 30 seconds later, you might have missed each other completely. That possibility can make the encounter feel almost cinematic. Yet the most important thing is not to treat every coincidence as proof of destiny. Instead, stay open to genuine human connection. If someone catches your attention, allow yourself to be present. If they begin a conversation, listen instead of immediately analyzing every word. If you feel comfortable, respond naturally. The first meeting does not need to answer every question. In fact, it should create more questions. Who are they? Why does their presence feel familiar? Will you see them again? Did they notice the same unusual connection? And perhaps the most powerful question of all, what happens when Monday ends and the memory of that brief encounter refuses to leave your mind? Here is where the location becomes even more specific in feeling. Look for a place where people naturally pause. Not somewhere you simply rush through, but somewhere there is a reason to stand still for a few moments. A counter. A waiting area. A doorway. A seating section. A checkout point. A coffee table. A public gathering space. A place where two people can notice each other without having to search. Your soulmate may be closer to you than the dramatic version of this story suggests. They could be someone whose path crosses yours because both of you have ordinary responsibilities that happen to overlap on the same day. And when the moment comes, one detail may stand out above everything else: their reaction when they realize you are looking at them. Maybe they smile. Maybe they become slightly shy. Maybe they look away and then glance back. Maybe they say something unexpectedly warm. That small reaction could become the first thread in a much larger story. But there is something you should remember: do not judge the entire connection by the first 30 seconds. Some of the most meaningful conversations begin awkwardly. People can be nervous. People can be distracted. People can hide interest because they do not know whether it is welcome. Give the moment room to unfold. Monday is not about forcing an outcome. It is about recognizing an opening. And if the opening appears, you may discover that the location you once considered completely ordinary now carries a memory you will never associate with that place in quite the same way again. And now comes the detail that could make you replay this entire message after Monday: the person may not simply cross your path once and disappear. The first encounter could create a reason for a second interaction. Maybe you meet again before leaving. Maybe you discover that you have something in common. Maybe the conversation ends, but circumstances bring you together one more time. That second moment is important because it removes some of the uncertainty from the first. The initial glance may have been coincidence. The second interaction gives the connection a chance to become intentional. You may notice that they remember something you said. They may ask you a question that shows they were genuinely listening. You may discover that the two of you share an unexpected interest, a familiar place, or a similar way of seeing something. And suddenly the encounter stops feeling like a random conversation and starts feeling like the beginning of a possibility. That is the real secret behind Monday. You do not need to know the entire future when the first moment arrives. You only need to recognize the opportunity to connect with another person honestly and naturally. So when you step into your day, do not spend every second searching for a stranger. Live your day. Follow your plans. Stay aware of the people around you. And if an unexpected conversation appears in an ordinary location, do not dismiss it simply because it did not arrive with a dramatic announcement. Sometimes the biggest turning points begin quietly. And the person standing across from you may have no idea that, for the first time, your two stories have just crossed. My beloved child, Monday has another clue hidden inside the place where this encounter unfolds, and this time, it is not about what the location looks like, it is about what you are doing when you arrive. You may enter expecting to spend only a few minutes there, yet something makes you slow down. Perhaps you are searching for something specific, waiting for someone, picking something up, grabbing a drink, browsing through a familiar section, or simply taking a short break before continuing your day. Then, without warning, you notice someone nearby. At first, there is no dramatic introduction. You may not even realize why your attention keeps returning to them. But then something small happens. They move closer. You cross paths. Your eyes meet again. One of you smiles. And suddenly, the ordinary rhythm of the place feels different. This is where the emotional pull begins, because you may have spent a long time wondering what your soulmate encounter would actually feel like. You may have imagined some perfect scene, some unforgettable entrance, some obvious sign that tells you immediately, this is the person. But real connection can be much quieter. It can arrive disguised as an ordinary conversation. The person may not say anything extraordinary. They may simply ask something, make a light observation, or respond to something happening around you. Yet their presence leaves an impression that seems strangely difficult to explain. You walk away, continue what you were doing, and then realize you are still thinking about that brief interaction. That is when curiosity begins replacing uncertainty. Who was that person? Why did that moment stay with you? And why did it feel like you had somehow noticed them before you actually met? Here is the part that makes the Monday story even more compelling. Your soulmate may initially appear to be focused on something completely unrelated to romance. They could be busy with their own plans, talking to someone, looking through something, carrying a bag, checking a schedule, or waiting for an appointment. This matters because it means you may not recognize their interest immediately. They may notice you first but hesitate to approach. You may notice them first but assume they are simply being polite. Both people could walk away with the same unanswered question. And that uncertainty creates the possibility of a second moment. Maybe you cross paths again a few minutes later. Maybe one of you realizes something was left behind and returns. Maybe you happen to stand near each other again because the location naturally brings people together. The second encounter can feel completely different from the first because now there is recognition. You know you have seen each other. That tiny familiarity makes it easier to speak. You might laugh about the coincidence. They might say something like, "We keep ending up in the same place." And suddenly the conversation becomes personal without either person forcing it. You may discover a shared interest, a similar destination, or an unexpected connection between your lives. What began as a glance becomes a conversation. What began as a conversation becomes curiosity. And curiosity is often the first doorway through which a deeper connection can enter. But do not overlook the strongest emotional clue. You may feel unusually comfortable being yourself around this person. Not perfect. Not rehearsed. Not desperate to impress them. Simply yourself. That matters because attraction can create excitement, but genuine compatibility often creates something quieter, ease. You may find yourself speaking naturally. You may laugh without thinking about how you sound. You may notice that they listen rather than constantly trying to control the conversation. They may remember a small detail you mentioned only moments earlier. They may ask questions because they actually want to know you, not because they are searching for the perfect thing to say. And perhaps you will notice something even more surprising. You are not trying to predict what happens next. You are simply enjoying the moment. That is the feeling worth paying attention to. The location may be ordinary, but the quality of the interaction can make it unforgettable. And this is why you should not become obsessed with finding an exact building, street, or business before Monday arrives. The deeper clue is the environment. A place connected to your normal routine, a place where people naturally pause, and a place where a small change in your schedule could put you in the right conversation at the right moment. If something unexpected invites you somewhere, consider it an opportunity rather than a guarantee. If you meet someone interesting, let them be a person before turning them into a prediction. The strongest beginning is always the one where two people are allowed to discover each other naturally. And just when you think you understand how the meeting begins, there is one final twist in this part of the story. The first person who catches your attention may not be the one who becomes important. You might initially notice someone else, only for circumstances to bring you into conversation with the person standing slightly behind them, beside them, or arriving moments later. That is why the location matters more than appearances. It creates possibilities you cannot predict from a distance. Imagine entering the place, looking around, noticing the obvious things, and then suddenly hearing a voice from somewhere you were not paying attention to. You turn. Your eyes meet theirs. For one brief second, everything else becomes background noise, not because something supernatural has happened, but because genuine human attention can be powerful. You may not know their story. They may not know yours. But the conversation begins, and that is enough. Later, you may replay the data.